Barometer has ended 2022
time for very reliable data. There's a lady here who has many different faces. She happened to have front seat during the Kufuor presidency, working with the Kufuor Foundation between 2010 and 2013. She is also a lecturer at GIMPA. She teaches leadership, business ethics, and corporate social responsibilities. She also has a more informal role as the president of the Date Rush Viewers Committee. So let me welcome my sister, Dr. Jemima Nunu. She's a speechwriter and principal researcher for ex-President John Agyekum Kufuor. Please. Do we have a mic?
Good evening, everyone. It's such a great honor for me to be here talking about a book that has been a long time in the pipeline and, dare I say, long overdue. I remember when Prof contacted me and asked me what I thought about the project and, more importantly, what I thought the President Kufuor would say about it. Having worked with President Kufuor for some years, I knew this book would be a project that he would fully support and endorse, which he did. And I was very eager and excited about the book project because I think such books are really necessary for us as Africans so that we're able to tell our own story based on our own data. So I took up the challenge presented to me by my dear friend, Prof. And the challenge was not only to introduce him to former President Kufuor, but also to bag an interview, which is no mean feat, really. But anyway, as a typical Manchester United fan, I was very determined, and I do not give up, as everybody who knows me. So, fortunately, we were able to meet up with former president and have some insightful interviews. And throughout the interviews that Prof conducted, I was present. What amazed me so much was the clarity in which he remembered certain instances and issues. Like the true statesman that he is, he was not only able to analyze, well, he did, and he analyzed in a way that only comes through critical reflection as well as the passage of time. I cannot overemphasize the importance of books like Notes from the Public Square. It's not only part of our academic literature, but it's also a book that forms part of our history and our wealth of knowledge. The uniqueness of this book is that it's able to paint a picture and tell a story based on data. And in doing so, it's able to bring data to life. My dear friend, Prof. Osai Kwapon, is a man who's renowned for his love of data. He's popularized Research Methods Fridays with his quirky and humorous creatives on research methods. I jokingly call him Prof. Afrobarometer, and I've taken to counting the number of times he mentions Afrobarometer in any given conversation or any interview that he does. But seriously, Professor Kwapon's love for data shines through this book. Despite his weak eye for football teams, he makes up for it in his attention to detail regarding data analysis. You won't regret purchasing this book. It's accessible, informative, and a good read. It is part of our history as a republic, a history that should be told from our perspective as Ghanaians. Thanks to Prof. Professor Kwapon, this book does just that, and for that, I say a big aiko and well done. Thank you.
I think that Ayiko and well done comes from all of us. Now let me introduce the man of the moment, who is a PhD in political science. Should we be pushing you into politics? Okay. Yes, because the science of it. What about the practice? Science is practice. So if you see him in the near future standing as member of parliament for any... Is there smoke now like the uniform for members of parliament? Okay, that's a good thing. It means Northern Ghana gets more money making smokes. Okay. He also has a master's in public administration with a concentration in public policy. Also a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science. His whole life is political. And yet he says he's not a politician. How is this possible? So we just need to complete the dressing, and then that's probably it. And get him to acquire some interesting pose. And that's it. We launch his political career. He also wears a very important cap as WOFA to so many people, including myself. And this evening, he has assembled all of us here, and I'm going to let him take over the mic to tell us what he has for us. Please.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Dr. Jumanolu, thank you very much for your kind introduction as well. I would hold it against you that you support Manchester United. I think if you... Let me just leave it at that. I thank you all for coming from Zimbabwe. Thank you so much. I remember back in 2017, I sent him an email and I said I'd like to be a fellow with CDD-Ghana. Prof had a number of questions for me. We had a very engaging conversation, and he said, welcome aboard. And 5 years later, it's been a very enriching experience, just learning from the work they do, learning from Prof Insights, the work that Kujo, Prof HKP, the whole center does. It's been a very rewarding and fulfilling experience. So I'm very, very grateful for that opportunity. So when I thought of this project, this is almost about 4 years now, I had stumbled across the Afrobarometer survey by chance several years ago. So I started, paying attention to it, and anytime that a new round was released, I would take a close look at it. And the more I looked at Afrobarometer, the more I said, this is a really rich source of information and data. And I was particularly struck that it was a reflection of the lived experiences of citizens of the countries that were participating in the survey. So that's how my interest in Afrobarometer developed. I know that there are several governance indices that are used, but the uniqueness of Afrobarometer is that it actually is based on the voice of citizens, what citizens think, how they feel at any given time. So based on that, then I also said to myself, we need to get to a point where we tell our stories, right? So I've known people who've served in public office, bureaucrats, civil servants, 30, 40 years. And I say to myself, these are the kinds of individuals who can put together very deep reflections that can serve as even texts that we use to teach in political science and public administration, that they have very unique perspectives. They experience things. They've learned things that they can pass on to us if we want to improve policy making, policy implementation, and all of those things. So that was my, my other motivation. And then I also said, there are times where when we want to tell a story, we try to reach out to the, the big name publishers, the non-Ghanaian publishing houses. And whilst they've been extremely helpful and they have their role, I also said, we have to tell our own story and capture our own stories. And so I'm very grateful for the likes of Nanaire Damois, his encouragement, his support, the avenue that he's really providing for us as Ghanaians to really tell our stories. And so I was very, very grateful for that. I became very interested in looking at our presidents in a very different way. So most of the books that are written about our presidents do look at them from an examination of their policies, programs, issues that came up during their presidency, etc., etc. But then I said to myself, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a way to capture how the citizens they served actually felt about their time in office? How did they feel? What did they think? What were some of the things that they expressed? And of course, where else to turn but to turn to Afrobarometer? The good thing about the Kufuor years was that it coincided with 3 rounds of Afrobarometer, 2002, 2005, 2008. So it put him in a position where you could actually look at the trajectory of Ghanaian thoughts and feelings during those years. 2002 meaning just a year into his administration, 2005, end of his first term, and now into his second term. And then 2008, the last year in his office. So I said, I definitely would start with those years and with former President Kufuor. And so I kept poring over the data. I tried looking at the key themes. I went back to research all the budget policy statements going back to 2001 to 2009. I looked at his State of the Union addresses as I was researching for the book. Then came the part where I said, but I also want to incorporate his voice in the narrative. I want to find out from him how he thought about certain things, all the way from getting into politics, what he was thinking in terms of the country that he was about to govern, but also give him opportunity to respond to the things that Ghanaians said about his years in office so that I could incorporate his voice into the narrative. And that's where Dr. Jemima Nunu was extremely helpful in arranging interviews, 2 interviews with him. And he was very candid, he was very open. All the observations that I had made from the data, I shared with him. He provided his response. I had other kinds of questions for him, and he was gracious enough to answer all of those questions. So there are just a few things that I want to highlight about the narrative. And as you purchase and read this book, that these are the things that I would say keep an eye out for. But there are other things that I think would also strike you as you read this text. So the first thing for me was when you become very intimate with the Afrobarometer data, one of the things that would strike you is that you would notice that Ghanaians tend to have very low trust in institutions that make democracy work. Trust levels are very low. What I noticed about the Kufuor years was that Kufuor, the person, in terms of trust and trust in institutions, were very different. That even as trust in institutions still remained, quote unquote, low, right? And I was looking at the highest qualitative option, which was you trust the particular institution a lot. Ghanaians still expressed a healthy level of trust in him, the person. And so for me, as a political scientist, whenever we always say that we need to build strong institutions and not strong men, it became an important point of reflection for me, right? That trust in him actually grew from 2002 to 2008, whilst our trust in institutions still remained a challenge. So that was one of the interesting points of reflection for me. When you look back, the perceptions of the Kufuor years was very high in 2002, but then took a very significant dip in 2005. and then ended up on a high in 2008. This morning I was asked in an interview, why was that? And I said, in thinking back, I think a few things saved the president from what I call his first term blues, right? So one, his approval rating remained very steady. Almost 8 out of 10 Ghanaians approved or strongly approved of the job that he was doing. And so even as in other areas he was taking a hit, I think that approval rating helped, quote unquote, saved his presidency from some of those first term blues. The other thing too was that in terms of how he was managing particular policy domains, job creation had seen a dip, providing water and sanitation had seen a dip. But addressing the education needs of Ghanaians and improving health services had actually seen an upward trajectory. So that helped that in two very critical sectors of the economy, health and education, Ghanaians remained very positive about him, even as some of those sentiments changed in 2005. And then trust in him also grew between 2002 and 2005. So the second point of reflection for me is, even though he suffered some serious blues at the end of his first term, there were quite a number of bright spots that I believed saved him and kept him in terms of Ghanaians still keeping the faith with him. The president rebounded by 2008 at levels that were even much higher in several areas than 2002. So you ask yourself that the goodwill that met him in 2002, how did he manage to recover a lot of that goodwill in 2008, some of which he had really lost in 2005? His perspective is that the challenges of governing is such that when citizens begin to experience your presidency through the policy choices you make, the program choices you make, the political choices you make, that it can sometimes jolt them into wondering, did we make the right choice, or we are not feeling the impact of a particular policy vis-a-vis all the campaign promises that you made. The other thing too is that it takes a while for policy to bear fruit. And so he again felt that some of those first-term challenges was policy waiting to really bear fruit. If you look at his presidency, he started off with a focus on the economy. And most of the social interventions actually came in his second term. And so I asked him about that. And he said, look, you can't do social intervention if the economy of your country is not strong. So his priority was grow the economy, make it strong, generate income, and then you can do things to support, the vulnerable in society and introduce, because at that point then you'd be able to do a lot of the social intervention that you want to engage in. And I think a lot of the policies bearing fruit was what resulted in the rebounding that the former president saw in 2008. Then the other point of reflection for me is the initial years of his presidency also saw what I refer to as democratic uncertainty. So if you look at 2002 Afrobarometer on the question of support for democracy, you see almost about 4 out of 10 answering that question with don't know. So in his first year in office, the support for democracy percentage was quite low. Satisfaction with democracy also saw quite a high percentage in the 30s, people answering don't know, right? So I considered that a period of democratic uncertainty. Do we really want this thing? Do we not want it? That surprised me because this was also a president who was coming on the back of a political tradition seen as champions of democracy and its critical links and nexus between democracy and development. But by the end of his term in office, that democratic uncertainty had completely vanished, right? Ghanaians had grown to strongly support democracy, and satisfaction with democracy had actually also significantly improved. In fact, one of the interesting things you would see in Afrobarometer on the question of extent of democracy is that it was only in his term that a majority of Ghanaians actually classified Ghana as a full democracy. Since then, we've gone between democracy, a democracy, but with different degrees of challenges. So that was also the other thing that really hit me as I was constructing the narrative, that through his years, democratic uncertainty almost but vanished, where Ghanaians grew to strongly support democracy and grew in their levels of satisfaction with democracy. The last thing that I would mention for me as a point of reflection was his notion of leadership. So originally in my last chapter, I was going to situate his presidency within the context of the 8 rounds of Afrobarometer. And he said to me, he doesn't see his years in office as a 100-meter race in comparison to others, where they all started at the same point and had to finish at the same point. And therefore, for him, he wants the focus to still be on just his years, what the people really think about him. So for that, let me end with the introduction to the last chapter. And this is from his last State of the Union address. So in his last State of the Nation address to Parliament, this is what he said. Mr. Speaker, when I was preparing this address, my attention was drawn to some speculations on the comparative performances between this government and previous regimes. Such speculations, Mr. Speaker, are futile. To me, it is useless to pretend to be the inventor of the wheel. Rather, the mark of the successful leader is what to do with the wheel that one finds. My account will therefore be restricted to the state of the nation as I found it on my assumption of office and how it has influenced the decisions and policies that I have enunciated in my bid to better the nation. So what I say today should not be thought of as an attempt at belittling what others did. Rather, it should be appreciated as a report of my government's performance over the past 7 to 8 years in office to improve the conditions of our people. My abiding principle has always been to leave a place better than I found it. Mr. Speaker, on balance, Ghana has been doing progressively well under my watch and enjoying tremendous goodwill from both within and from the international community as a result of the performance of the government over the past 7 years. And that was my guide in concluding this narrative about the Kufuor years. So I let that inform what I did. And so if you read the book, you would see that where he talks about the country he came to meet. I have a chapter on perceptions of the country he came to meet. And then I end with my reflections on the perceptions of the country he was leaving behind, because nothing was more important to him than just telling the story of the years that he was in office. And I'm grateful that I've been able to complete this project. I'm excited to see it finally come to fruition. And I just hope that as we all read it from different perspectives, that we would take important lessons from what Ghanaians expressed during the Kufuor years. But most importantly, and I'll keep saying this, I hope that this is not the only project that we are going to see based on data from the Afrobarometer, because like I keep saying, we are still yet to even fully explore the richness and the depth of what Afrobarometer can do for us in terms of constructing narratives about the lived experiences of not just even Ghanaians, but Africans on the continent. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Dr. Osai Kwapong, for summing it all up for the rest of us to be able to patiently read it later. I have a question for you. They say Africa needs strong institutions, not strong men. But after writing this book, going through the details, because I see you mentioned sometimes that trust in the person is higher than trust in institutions, and it continues to vary from year to year. What do you conclude on at the end of it? Strong institutions or strong men?
I think we need both. I don't think it's an either-or proposition at this point, that strong institutions help, but you need, quote-unquote, strong men. Let me rephrase it. Yes, we need strong persons, right?
Okay.
That it's a two-pronged sword that helps good governance.
And when you started writing the book, what were your expectations before writing? And when you had concluded, was there any variation in your expectations and your experience of actually writing it?
So I think because I had at least taken a number of looks at the Afrobarometer data, initially I said, okay, it looks like...
A little familiar.
It looked very, very familiar. But you do see some very important variations in perceptions as you move across different groups, as you move across different regions. But the surprising thing is they all generally converged at a point where you can walk away saying, this was a man who was very well received by the people he served.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to be asking you more questions shortly, but we'll give it a breather for now, so prepare yourself. You may have to sound like a politician in answering some of them. But we're also lucky to have here some first readers who have read the book. How lucky. And are going to just take us quickly through a few short pages, and then we'll get some questions from Dr. Osai Kwapong. We have Rosemary Abwajintim, who's a Facebook friend I am meeting for the first time. No, please, yeah, just keep your seats. Keep your seats. But before that, please go to, if you're on Facebook, just go to CDD-Ghana and just repost the streaming of this event. You can also check on their YouTube page and share the link. Is there something, Madam Jemima? Okay. So please just share the link. Let other people be able to follow the program, as we can't fit everyone here due to COVID protocols. Now we'll have Jemima take over. Sorry, we'll have Rosemary take over. Thank you.
Hello. Sometimes he deceives himself that he's the only mama, but but unfortunately he's not.
But his own is on a different level.
He is not, because his mom is my mom too.
Hey.
Someone I love very much.
Does she make you that empathy?
More than that. Just that I don't post pictures.
Oh, okay. He's the one who's been shouting.
Yes. He makes a lot of noise. All right, so I call him the data man. And if the data man writes a book, you can be assured that it's fact-based and it's filled with a lot of data. Data that, inspires, not just ordinary data. Data that you will enjoy reading, and therefore I have enjoyed reading. I'm going to do what I call inverted reading, because this is how this book, notes from the public square, relates to me. So I'm going to start my first paragraph from chapter 7. Then I'll take you to chapter 2. Go and conclude at chapter 2. That's how I want to read it.
Any particular reason?
The reason is chapter 2 talks about policy. but the man became president. For me, he became president. I saw it because as a young journalist, at that time I was practicing and trying to pick up, and I saw it all. I played a little bits of roles from the media house where I was working, and so I can relate with chapter 7. Okay. And then we can talk about policy. Also, which I find relatable. So I'll start from chapter 7. The topic is democracy and the governance environment during the Kufuor years. The election of former President Kufuor and the peaceful transfer of power to his party on January 7, 2001 marked an important milestone in the political history of post-independence Ghana. It was the first ever election in Ghana which political power was handed over from one government to another through a democratic election. It was also the first election in the Fourth Republic where the incumbent political party lost to the main opposition political party. The changeover from one government to another, a competitive multi-party, was important for the development of Ghana's Fourth Democratic Republic, as it placed the country on a solid footing for democratic consolidation, 8 years after the 1992 transition elections. So this is my first paragraph, which means that power has been handed to former President Kufuor at this time. And so I'll pick it now from chapter 2. On the subtopic, you can turn to page 28 if you have your book. On the subtopic, economic policy initiatives, I'm reading from, actually it's page 30, the second paragraph on page 30. It says, one of the guiding principles of the government of President Kufuor was its belief in the critical role of the private sector. His party often argued that the engine of growth for any economy was the private sector and the extent to which a government created an enabling environment for the private sector to flourish. The former president reiterated this point when I interviewed him. A number of steps were taken to show the government's commitment to this principle. One such step was the continuation of the divestiture implementations program, in which the state's stake in several economic enterprises were turned over to private sector actors. The government wanted the private sector to truly play a pivotal role in the growth of the Ghanaian economy. It says the tools of government on economic matters include the use of taxes, whether to eliminate them, decrease them, or increase them. The Kufuor years saw a careful combination of these as noted below. Now, there are a number of them that he's listed. I can't read them all, but I'm going to pick a favorite 3. And then when you buy the book, you can read the rest. I think you should, because you really enjoy reading them. My first pick is that the Kufuor government increased the road maintenance levy to help maintain the country's road network. And I do remember this clearly, and that's why it's my first pick. My second pick also is the government of former President Kufuor also introduced a national health premium to help fund the National Health Insurance Scheme. And then also, coming down, it's waived the value added tax placed on salt to help promote and develop the salt industry. These are the 3 that I'll choose. There are many more there that I think you'll find exciting. And I can relate to this because I saw him come to power 8 years after his government, or even before he left government. As a young entrepreneur, I saw a boom in entrepreneurship, and so I confidently stepped into business at this time. And that's my choice. That's the reason why I made this choice to read this chapter. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So we can say the Kufuor administration inspired you to become an entrepreneur.
It did, and I think I've told you once.
Okay,
before.
okay. How has it gone since then? Okay, I think that answered it properly for us. Dr. Ozan Ikwapon, do you want to say anything in addition to what she said?
I think particularly the chapter that she read in terms of the governance environment during the Kufuor years. Originally, it actually wasn't one of the chapters I was going to really focus on. But in my interview with him, as I went through all the different themes that I had captured for the purposes of the book, he did say to me, but everything I did also had a context, the governing context. Elections, how people felt about democracy, how people felt about institutions. So I actually had to go back to the drawing board. I find it very interesting that that chapter that came much later in the process actually caught your attention.
So now I understand why it was at the back.
Yes.
Interesting. I'm going to call on someone else to take us through a few more chapters, and then we can get some reactions to them. I'll call on Richard Osei Enim, our senior entrepreneur. Maybe later he can also tell us how the entrepreneurship journey goes. But please, take it away.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for the invitation to read some chapters. I came in the dying embers of President Kufuor's administration, Easter Monday, 2008. I landed with British Airways. I was actually coming for a week to do some work with the Ghana Cocoa Board. And the week became a month became a year, and the contract was for 3 years. So I see you've mentioned something about the resource, efforts in the resource sectors. I mean, there are so many chapters that resonate with me: education, youth, the business environment, and so on. But since you were stingy with your time, of 5 minutes,
sorry,
I'll just focus. But one of the things you said, which has registered on that other platform, you know the other platform, yes, is how you get intimate with the data. People are asking whether, statistics is like a bikini. It can reveal whatever you decide for it to reveal. Anyway, so on the efforts in the resource sectors, in the cocoa sector, the government embarked on the following mass spraying of cocoa farms, rehabilitation of cocoa roads, a cocoa and pests control program aimed at controlling black pod and capsid diseases, and the continuation of the Cocoa Board Scholarship Program to ensure that the children of cocoa farmers were provided with the financial assistance to attend secondary school. Additionally, the government facilitated the National Cocoa Child Labor Elimination Program aimed at stopping the use of child labor in the cocoa sector. These efforts also included the regular raising of the producer price of cocoa paid to the farmers by the government. I was deep into Cocoa Board strategy at the time. Within a week of dealing with Isaac Osei and his team, we were dealing with directors and principal clerks and all those things. So that was when we launched the 1 million ton strategy, which culminated in Ghana actually hitting 1 million tons in 2011, 3 years after we were involved in that project. So it's interesting to find you capture that in the book. There was something I saw about youth. I'll just do youth and then, yes, the youth, page 98. As per National Youth Policy, the youth is defined as anyone between the ages of 15 to 35. So those that are 40 and 50 and claiming their youth, National Youth Policy is between 15 to 35. The Afrobarometer survey requires that respondents are at least 18 years of age. Therefore, the youth for the purpose of this analysis ranged in age between 18 and 35. The youth is often described as the future generation of the country. So how did this group feel about Kufuor years? The youth also saw their perceptions of the Kufuor years improved greatly over time. On the country's economic conditions, perceptions improved by an average of 15 percentage points, whereas on matters of the individual's living conditions, perceptions improved by an average 13 percentage points. The youth regained their sense of optimism about the country's future in 2008 after experiencing a downturn in 2005. On job creation, you have something on job creation as well. It'll be interesting to compare job creation then and job creation now. My last paragraph is on your seventh observation. Job creation is one area where governments have not received positive ratings in the Afrobarometer survey. In 2008, 54% of Ghanaians rated their president's efforts in the area of job creation as fairly well or very well. Although the lowest rated area among the 6 key areas examined during the Kufuor years, it remains the highest through this history of Afrobarometer in Ghana. The former president threw out a number of suggestions, attraction of more. Okay, let me go back to one key point, and then I'll end. I think you asked him about the job creation with other governments, and you wanted to know why job creation continues to be a challenge in Ghana. The former president pointed to a number of key factors. He couched the problem as one of demand and supply. With improvements in education and several people graduating with skills, the production rate of employable people, supply, continues to outpace the rate of job creation, thereby creating a gap. The former president threw out a number of suggestions: attraction of more rapid investments, providing incentives that allow the private sector to grow more, and engaging in public sector initiatives like value addition. All these measures, he said, can help alleviate the unemployment challenges faced in Ghana and how Ghanaians evaluate the performance of governments when it comes to job creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But before you drop that, how do you evaluate the performance of governments in terms of job creation?
It's a mixed bag. There are several programs over the years that are designed to support the creation of jobs. You've got entrepreneurship programs, you've got all sorts of youth engagement programs and so on. Apart from the policy that sometimes I have challenges with, I also think there's a challenge, a misalignment between those running those institutions, their experience, track record, and the kinds of outputs that they seek to achieve. How do you put somebody who's never run a business in charge of an entrepreneurship program? Those are bound to have challenges.
So there's a political angle that conflicts
Yeah,
with the agenda.
there's the politics. I mean, one guy told me, look, when they were in the trenches, where were you? Yeah.
And, okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for reading and for giving us your opinion. Prof, is there anything you want to add?
So real quick, if you look at 8 rounds of Afrobarometer, unemployment and job creation has consistently remained as the #1 policy priority of Ghanaians. I mean, it was upstaged in round 7 by infrastructure, but by round 8, the #1 policy priority was back to unemployment. It also continues to be the area in which, when Ghanaians evaluate government performance, that it remains not as high as the other areas, like, for instance, education or health. So it's an important policy priority for Ghanaians, and it also remains the area in which Ghanaians are not over the 8 rounds of Afrobarometer, have not really rated governments very well. President Kufuor had a 54% approval rating in job creation, and in all of the other rounds, it hasn't gone beyond that. So it really remains an area of concern for Ghanaians.
Number one priority for Ghanaians, seemingly priority for governments, and yet the results are not as exciting as the input or supposed input. What we've been made to believe is the input that's put in it through all governments. Is there something there that we're not doing right, or governments are not doing right? Maybe Professor Jima can also help you respond if he feels up to the task. Do you mind doing us the honor, please? Let me just pass this on to him. Okay, great. Yeah, so what I'm saying is, they say job creation, employment continues to be priority for most Ghanaians. He said it fell off only 1 year and then rebounded. But we also see that governments consistently say it is priority for them. And governments consistently implement policies that are supposed to solve that. So how come we're not getting accelerated results for these supposed interventions? And we still have it as such an important issue.
Well, I don't know whether it will cheer you or depress you, but that is the story at the continental level as well.
Okay.
At the continental level, job unemployment remains the topmost policy priority of Africans from Afrobarometer round 1 to the latest, to the 8th and the 9th. So it's a challenge, and it's also one area where government performance is consistently rated in negative terms.
Okay.
As to why it happens, maybe Mr. Nim and his friends can, those who are in the forefront of job creation, can
they are in the trenches.
Yes, can best address that. But I think some of that, within that, you can still see variations. And there were variations in the data covering the Kufuor administration. I think it will be even more interesting to see if we thought it was bad in the Kufuor era, what it had been, what it became
later
in subsequent administrations.
Interesting. Yes, please. Thank you. Let him.
A lot of scandals have been reported on all sorts of job creation schemes, from GDA to YE and all those kinds of things, which means there's something fundamentally wrong with the structure of such projects. The policy intent may be fantastic, and there are all sorts of objectives that we're looking to be achieved, but it's always at the execution stage. That's where there are problems.
Should governments be the ones creating jobs?
Okay.
They have to create an enabling environment for what you call.
So why is that not happening?
Before we digress. Yes. But that clearly shows that it is indeed at the forefront of everything that Ghanaians are thinking and doing. Because without jobs, how are we going to afford basic, simple livelihoods?
I think the reason I took the microphone is that I think that it's about time we realize that I don't think it should be government's role to create the jobs.
Yes, I think that has been agreed on a lot of, I personally agree, it's not the role of government to create jobs, but government is fundamental to every policy that is implemented, and government can throw off the ability of the people to create jobs with one single move. So at the end of the day, like he mentioned, the environment, creating the environment that enables people to be able to create jobs. Well, that's what I think. You want to say something?
A quick comment. I don't think when people say unemployment is their topmost priority, they are saying that they expect government to be
create jobs.
the one to directly create the jobs. I don't think they even think too hard about the sources of the job or who should be the job creator. Just that it's one area they expect government to somehow empower or make happen. How it happens is another story.
Right. So the private sector is the engine of it, but government has to power that engine. That's how I reason it.
Instead of using the money to set up data, use the money, give the money to an entity.
All right.
But perhaps this is a lesson for those of us involved with the environment to ask questions about expectations.
Indeed, expand
Who do we expect
to create the jobs
create the job?
that we are.
Maybe a good advisory to policy makers.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Jimabwedi.
So,
Okay.
Well,
We'll
I
come
just-
to
I'll
that-
circle
We'll
back.
come to that at the end of the readings. But for now, let's please go to Danny Marie van der Poel. She's going to take a few. Sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah, I really wanted to draw our attention to the fact that the Kufuor administration really emphasized on the growth of the private sector, and he really put in a lot of effort to to empower the private sector to be able to deliver on employment and whatnot. So let's bear in mind that he did find that relevant, and he knew that government was not the one to do. So.
Right. Thank you so much. But let's move to the next reading, please. I see jobs are a sensitive subject for all of us.
Indeed it is. I picked,
Are you reading anything about jobs?
thankfully not. Although that's what I work in youth livelihoods, but for the purpose of this book, I picked a paragraph from chapter 6 because I believe that, in everything you do, you need to hear from what your critics also have to say. So I picked the paragraph on National Democratic Congress, partisan, and I picked the last paragraph on page 94.
Right.
So I read.
So if you can just go there so you can read
yes.
with her. Follow as you.
In evaluating government performance, the perceptions of NDC partisans were particularly very positive in two areas by the end of Kufuor's term in office. When asked how well the government was handling the education needs of Ghanaians, 75% said fairly well or very well, with another 74% saying he handled improving basic health services fairly well or very well too. Although areas such as handling of providing water and sanitation services, managing the economy and creating jobs were not rated as high, no more than 51% approval rating, all three areas saw significant improvements in evaluation between 2002 and 2008. The fight against corruption was the only area that saw no improvement in the assessment of government performance by the NDC partisans. NDC partisans' approval of the performance of the former president remained at 48%. Let me put this in perspective. In round 5, 2012 of the Afrobarometer survey, the sitting president was NDC. In that round, only 30% of NPP partisans said they approved of the president's performance. In round 6, 2014, also during an NDC president's era, only 11% of NPP partisans said they approved of his performance. In round 7, 2017, with an NPP sitting president, 51% of NDC partisans said they approved of his performance, only for that to drop to 40% in round 8 in 2019. The point here is that within this context, one can appreciate the former president maintaining a 48% approval rating without any decline during his years in office among NDC partisans. Trust in the former president, however, greatly improved by the end of his term, as NDC partisans grew to trust him at a level higher than they indicated in 2002. The same was true of their perception of how they perceived the former president, ignored the laws or the constitution. All in all, there were several bright spots in how NDC partisans described the Kufuor years. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Danny Marie. Do you have personal observations you want to comment on?
Like I said at the beginning, it's always important. I mean, you can always have those who are your yes men telling you how great of a job you are doing. It's something I've observed. Like Richard, I came in 2008, so I didn't really get to enjoy the Kufuor years. But in being in Ghana since then, an observation I've made is that times when you see something that's so glaring and you think this is such a clear opportunity for government to step in and create an environment that can easily resolve certain issues. But you sit back and you realize that maybe those are the grassroots who feed the information to the leadership are not able to tell them exactly what the truth is. I'll give a prime example. I tell this story quite often. I had the opportunity to go to Bogoso by public transportation, and coming back to Accra, the bus arrives around 3 a.m. Now, we've heard for many years about people sleeping on verandas. But to my shock and my dismay, it was no longer in the verandas. They were sleeping on the literal streets of Accra Central at 3 a.m. This is something that could easily be addressed, maybe find ways to work with the private sector in the affordable housing areas and all of that, to ensure that that level of deprivation is ameliorated. But it looks like at the leadership level, sometimes it goes beyond just the yes men to actually hear what your critics have to say, this is wrong, help us deal with this, and let it work. And for NDC partisans to see Kufuor in a light as positive as they did, it means that he was, at least maybe had eyes on the ground to see what the true picture was to help to ameliorate the problems of the time.
Looks like Kufuor had more love than most. Prof, if you can expand on what she's saying.
Yes, so one of the things that I decided to probe the data for was that normally when you take things in the aggregate, it may hide some of the intricate details, right? That the big picture may be at odds with when you begin to dice and slice the data. And so I looked at several different groups. There's a question in Afrobarometer that asks, do you feel close to any political party? And then if you say yes, the follow-up question is, which particular political party? And so for those who answered that question, taking their answer to represent the closeness they feel to a particular party, I was curious to see those who identify themselves as NDC partisans, how they felt, right? Because you know that by default, if I feel close to a particular party, my sentiments about that party will be positive. But I was quite struck that in two areas in particular, addressing education needs, improving basic health services, that NDC partisans held, 7 out of 10 of people in the opposition actually appreciating the efforts you're doing in such a sector is no mean achievement. And then consistently, 48% throughout said they approved of the work he was doing. What I also appreciate was that trust, yes, it wasn't 60, 70%, but there was a significant improvement between his first year in office. And if you look at the data post-2008 and you dissect trust by partisan attachments, you do see that the levels of trust based on our partisan affiliations are quite strong. I only trust those that I feel close to, and I mistrust those who are on the other side of the political aisle. So that was quite an instructive chapter to pick. But yes, it's one of the things where when you look at, you start getting a sense that all in all, that this was a man that his efforts in different areas of the Ghanaian economy or even in trying to govern the country was appreciated.
Prof, I wish I could make you speak more on that particular subject, but we're a bit pressed for time, so I'll just go to AC quickly so she can take her chapters. But before that, there are a few people giving you shout-outs on Facebook. Let me just go over it. So, Echeche Kanku is saying, great work, congratulations, Doc. George Kwekuofosu is saying the same thing. He's saying, congratulations. Fantastic work, and congratulations to Professor John Osai-Kwapong from Terry Mante. Also, Joel Vanderpoel is there shouting out to his sister. So I'm not sure which of us is his sister. Right. Okay. So, AC, please do us the honors.
Thank you. I'm reading from chapter 6, and chapter is divided into special groups. And I'm going to have women, the special group. Just a second. Yeah. And so it talks about women constitute about 49% of the total Ghanaian population. In the 3 rounds of the Afrobarometer survey conducted during the 4 years, women respondents ranged between 49% and 52%. As part of this work, it was crucial to capture the voice of women. How did they feel about the 4 years, and what did they say regarding the themes of focus in this book? The matters of the country's economic conditions as well as the individual's living conditions. The perception of women saw a positive change between 2002 and 2008. For example, the percentage saying the country's present economic conditions were fairly good, very good, increased by 12 percentage points. Those saying the country's economic conditions 12 months ago were better, much better, increased by 9 percentage points. The percentage saying the individual's present living conditions were fairly good, very good, increased by 13 percentage points. Optimism among women was also high in 2008, especially about the individual's living conditions, with 73% saying that conditions will be better, will be better or much better. Self-reported experiences with deprivation showed higher percentages of women reporting never going without food. I find this very interesting. 7 out of 10, water, 6 out of 10, cooking fuel, 7 out of 10, and medical care, 6 out of 10 over a 12-month period. These numbers had improved when compared with what women reported in 2002. Cash income deprivation, similar to other groups, saw only 3 out of 10 women in 2008 reporting going without it over a 12-month period. I'm happy that Professor Osai-Kwapong took time to capture women's opinion and how women felt at the time. One of the things that he doesn't capture this in the book, but I feel that the Kufuor administration could have done better, looking at how supportive women were of him and how encouraging they sound, during his administration, was perhaps to have really gone the extra mile and done something much, significant for women. And I would cite the affirmative action bill. If he had seen to it being passed, I think it would have really advanced the cause of women in our development as a nation. It's interesting that a decade down the road, he made the call that the affirmative action bill, the percentage of women he was calling for 40, should be increased to 50. So I'm happy to know that women were actually very, not just supportive, but spectating and watching, closely how the government was impacting on them.
And making themselves heard.
Very much so.
Thank you, AC. Prof, could he have done more? Shall I let Jemima answer that?
Well, I think hindsight is 20/20 vision, and I think that every president, given the number of years they have in office, if they were given more time, would say, I could have done more. I think in governing, you have to choose a number of key priorities and try to focus on those key priorities. But you're right. I'm sure with hindsight and with more time, every president would have loved to do a lot more.
But isn't that an easy way out? So everyone always says, oh, we could have done more, given a bit more time. Why didn't you do it? Could you have at least started the foundation, built it to a certain point, so we are absolutely sure that that given more time, you would have done more. And I'm not saying this for a general perspective, but for women specifically. Like she mentioned the bill, and I'm being a bit biased here. Please do. That they have introduced.
Well, we might also add an engagement
Yes.
Precious much in comparison to others. Interesting.
No. No, I didn't capture that.
So maybe going for, that's another suggestion for Afrobarometer. Let me go to Dixon Sapong quickly so he can take us through. Can you tell us where you're reading from and why you have chosen those specific pages?
Yeah, so I'm picking from chapter 2, page 32. Yes, so that falls under economic policy initiatives. And Prof indicated that when he queried the former president, he mentioned about a good economic footing before social intervention could be rolled out. And I'll also go to chapter 34, the last but one paragraph. The reason being that I'm a social protection practitioner, and it's really encouraging reading from what the former president did. And maybe I'll touch on that after I'm done reading. Okay, so chapter, page 32, the last paragraph. So the government of the former president also recognized an important link between industrialization and economic growth. In that regard, it embarked on several key initiatives. For example, it established the Venture Capital Trust Fund, underlined, which provided financial resources for venture capital financing. The financing was meant for small and medium enterprises, SMEs, in priority sectors of the economy. It rolled out a district industries program, please underline that one as well, where 38 districts in Ghana were going to be assisted with funding to create district industries in partnership with the private sector investors. Another key initiative was the President's Special Initiative, underlined also, that introduced many non-traditional products for value addition and export. The government chose 4 areas to focus on regarding this initiative: textiles and garments, salt mining, oil palm, and cassava starch production. I want to quickly touch on the underlined areas. And I think in between 2016 and now 2022, we've been talking about 1D, 1F. But clearly, this is a vision of a man who knew the end from the start of his administration. And we will ask quickly that where are the district industries program? Were they pursued? We will be talking about 1D, 1F today from the scratch. So clearly, the administration of President Kufuor, as Prof described as a man who was warmly accepted, cannot be in doubt. Now, we also talk about chapter, page 34, the last but one. So, before the effort in the resource sector. So I read, Prof asked former President Kufuor why a center-far right party will be so interested in social intervention programs. And his answer was simple. The party is not hidebound by ideology. He further described his party as center-right with a conscience. He believed that it was every government responsibility to create equal opportunity for all people. This meant that if people lived in stark poverty, it was important to lift them out. He also argued that a safety net ought to be always created for the people. His final point was this: ensure that no one falls below a minimum standard of living, of decent living. The social intervention effort of his government is a testament to these words he shared with me. Practically, from where I stand, I think there were many interventions that the Kufuor administration rolled out, from capitation grants, from school feeding, from the national health insurance, a whole lot. And ultimately, the livelihood employment against poverty, which now has failed on its rollout. And I must critically say this. And I'm doing a research on that area. Why, as a policy that was meant to take people out of poverty, and now it remains like we are doling out money to people consistently, and they have been on it for life. Is it economically prudent? That is why people wouldn't support this idea. So yes, the idea of the man was not to see people die on it, but to have a transformative agenda that will make them more powerful to control their own life without relying on it. So I think the man had a vision, and the vision was all rolled out, and people saw it. And definitely, if we had continued with the vision that he had, probably today Ghana would have been a different country altogether. So I must say, yes, I met Kufuor in 1999 in a small town in the Western region, campaigning to become the president. That was the first time. And I fell in love with the man. And I must say that it has never changed till today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dixon. Prof, your comments.
I think I was quite struck also by, we tend to talk about political parties in terms of who is center-left and who is center-right and who is a conservative and who is a liberal. And so in the Ghanaian context, you tend to hear, center-right being the MPP and center-left being the NDC. And sometimes we have conversations where we say, well, ideology really doesn't play a role in Ghanaian politics. I sometimes jokingly say we have two center-left parties, to which my friend Evron Hughes would say one is more compassionate than the other, right? But I was quite struck that if you think of the MPP and this political tradition, that if we are to believe that ideologically it's a center-right party, then I was quite struck by the number of social intervention policies that the Kufuor years saw the government rolling out. And that was his response, which was center-right with a conscience, that you need to lift people out of poverty, that you have to take care of the vulnerable in society.
Sure. To be fair, I would love for a lot of more people to speak, but time is a social contract. So let me rush through the important bits, and then we can take side comments before we leave here. I'm learning a lot from this, and I'm very grateful for this book. When Kufuor became president, I was 14 years old. So this is an eye-opener, and then I get to read a lot more of it. Why are you laughing? And then I get to read more about it, so it gives me more detail about a period that I missed because I was too young to understand fully what policy was about. So we are very, very grateful to every one of you here for your reading, your chapters. So if you can give them a hand, please. The readers. They have teased out points I'm sure a lot of people will take note of. And Professor Osai Kwapong has an opportunity to ponder over it before the questions start coming in. And to our virtual audience also, we are very, very grateful that you have tuned in and you have commented and said a lot concerning this particular book launch. I'm sure Prof will be engaging with a lot of you after this, and you can easily reach out to him. Prof is very engaging on social media. That's how I got to know you, Facebook. Isn't Facebook such a resource? So I'm going to take a few comments from YouTube. Okay, I would like you to explain the laugh, but as you are saved. You are saved by time. I think Rosemary is teasing me and he's laughing. So, so there are a lot of comments on YouTube. A lot of them saying hello, congratulations, Ayuko Prof from Abena Asari. Congratulations, Professor John from Juliet Adesina. Great question. I'm not sure which question she's referring to. Patrick Stevenson is saying, congratulations, Uncle John. He says, Uncle UNKU. Uncle John. There's Erica E. shouting out and clapping for Mr. Enim. There's Kofi and Tim who's saying thank you, Rose. Also Erica E. saying thanks, Rosemary. Congrats, brother from Eco Official. Again from Janet Osai Kwapon. Congratulations, Doc. Very proud of you. Does that mean she's going to give you more shito?
Abna Sari is there.
Oh, that's okay. Okay. Tell her now you deserve a discount. Again, Janet says, Ma says, Ayuko, you make us all proud. So there's a lot of congratulations from so many other people. Now let me go to a very senior friend who happens to be the legal policy and governance specialist, also director of advocacy here at CDD. And I want to use this opportunity to announce that when I call his phone, he should pick and come on Spotlight when we invite him. Pick your phone. Don't pick your phone once out of 5 calls. Pick your phone maybe 2-3 times. So please, Dr. Kojo Asante, we're just going to call on you to give us the closing remarks. But give me a moment before that. Prof, you want to add anything else before he closes it up?
No, I think we've really touched on the key themes, the key central issues. I think there's going to be a lot of conversations, reflections as others also engage with the books. I think we're good.
Fantastic. So, okay.
Yes, and so if you look at evaluation of government performance, one of the questions I look at is the fight against corruption. And it actually was the one area where he didn't fully rebound, that he had 63% approval in 2002, which dropped to about 55% in 2005, and then remained at 56% in 2008.
So the perception wasn't so great. Okay, thank you. Okay, see?
Right, but you also have to also understand how he thought of leadership, right? Which is the will he came to meet and what he did with the will he came to meet, which meant that the stars were aligned, the resources that came his way, the challenges he faced, etc., etc. Through all of that, the priorities he set and how he tried to govern the country, right? That I think, depending on the circumstances you come and meet, some may make good use of those circumstances and some may not necessarily do that. And so it's all about the leadership philosophy, the priorities you set, and how you go about governing. So yes, HIPIC was an initiative then. It allowed some debt relief and space to be able to do other kinds of interventions in the economy.
So it did enable him in some ways.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Prof. Let me just go straight to Dr. Kojo Asante for the closing remarks. We can have side conversations after. Thank you for understanding.
Hello?
Yes.
All right. So just to say congratulations to John. I've enjoyed this, and maybe, Mame, it's something that we should be doing some more book reading. It's more job, right? But maybe with a little alcohol too. That would help. But, I mean, this is fascinating. I think we forget in our context that a president is really powerful. Just because also of the design of our constitution, but there's a lot of discretion and power that the president wields. And if the president exercises that in a positive way, it can change many, many lives. So this is a real sort of testament as to really what all of this means when we are talking about what kind of leadership we should be cultivating in a place like this. And a lot of his interventions really did change a lot of lives, particularly in the social sector. So it's a real good insight, and just listening to people reading it, I'm eager to go and get my own reading started. But I also have lots of questions, John, and I'm sure that's probably some of the experience I'm going to have when I'm done, because sometimes I think maybe when you have an equal opportunities corruption, maybe the rating, whether it is partisans or not, you probably get a positive rating if people are spreading the corruption, fairly well, distributing the corruption well. But the corruption question is interesting, why even with partisans, you don't get a good rating. And that's why I'm wondering whether maybe if they got their share, they probably will be very positive in the rating. But I wanted to, I don't know how much oil had a role to play in the rebound, for instance, because we discovered oil in 2007. No, sure, but I'm talking about, yes, the perception. Because, you talk about 2017 in terms of some of the ratings, the euphoria people get when, they have optimism going forward. But anyway, as I said, I'll go and do my own reading. I'm sure we'll have more conversations. Thank you very much to our moderator. Thank you very much, John, for writing. I know there are many, many books now lined up. People are giving you all kinds of jobs. and to our first readers, to Dr. Nunu for your remarks. Prof, for spending your evening with us. Really appreciate it. And to the team at CDD, the comms team, for all the support and great work. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you so much.
If you want copies of the book, they are available on Amazon. In Ghana, you can contact Book Nook Store by Nana Ire Damwa. And then Whispers is a shop in Accra City Hotel. You can find copies of the book there as well. But thank you so much, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. So you can just quickly go to the outlets that he's mentioned. Those of us, those in out of the country can purchase on Amazon and have it delivered directly to them. So buy the book, tell your friends about it, let your friends buy it, and keep it going. My name is Noang Valong. I'm a journalist, and it's been such an honor to sit here with all of you this evening. Good evening.